currently an assistant professor of political science at the University of Oklahoma. Prior to that, she received her doctorate from New York University and was a postdoctoral fellow at the Center on Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law at Stanford University. She was also a junior visiting fellow at the Human Rights Program at Harvard Law School and Harvard University. Dr. Bracic's dissertation and her postdoctoral work has focused on human rights, and particularly the human rights of a group whose persistent lack of human rights has concerned us in many of the genocides we have already considered in this course, the Roma. In addition to alerting us to the plight of the Roma in the 21st century, particularly in Slovenia and Croatia, Dr. Bracic may also discuss those strategies that she has found most effective for improving the plight of Roma today. So please welcome Professor Anna Bracic.
Hello. Everything working? Yes? Great. Thank you for having me, and thank you for coming to listen today. So the overall aim of my lecture today is actually going to be slightly different. I will highlight certain aspects of the Romani, Holocaust, the Prerequisite, and I will try to link them to the treatment of Roma today, broadly in Central, Eastern, and Western Europe. So I will only be talking about certain aspects of rights violations. Am I too quiet? Yes. Oh, is it not working? Okay. Well, so I won't be talking about all of the violations that the Roma have experienced, just because there are so many. So I will only focus on some, and then during the Q&A, if you wish me to talk more about things that I have found effective in my own work, I'd be very happy to speak to that then. Is that better? No. All right, let's see if I can do this. 2 hands. All right. So before I start, I want to make sure that we know one thing, that numbers when it comes to the Roma, not just during the Corona months, but also now, numbers are uncertain. We don't really know even how many Roma there are in Europe today. Estimates report about 10 to 12 million, but we're not certain. So whenever I talk about numbers, especially as they refer to the World War II period, please take them with a grain of salt. There's much unknown. So the roadmap of today's presentation is this. First, I will talk about the Roma briefly. Then I will talk about the Prerequisite, which is the Roman Holocaust, and then the legacy of the Prerequisite. Now, who are the Roma? The Roma have many faces, right? There are many that are not known to us because, they're included, they've integrated into majority populations. But, to some of us, they may look something like that. So they are derogatively known as gypsies. The quotes around every word, every time, but it's a bad word, I don't say it. Unless I say it in particularly in a verbal context, like, talking about the Holocaust. So, they're Europe's largest ethnic minority. Population counts are uncertain. Estimates report that they're between 10 and 12 million in Europe today. They're not a homogeneous ethnic group. Groupings differ considerably in terms of the way of life, language, dialect, absolutely from village to village even, and level of marginalization and inclusion as well. So the population I'll be talking about today are partly Roma and Sinti mainly in Austria and Germany, but I'll be referring to Roma just using the term as an umbrella, easier reference. So a bit of history. A recent oh yes, forgot. I have a slide. No longer itinerant. They're travelers in the UK, some in France, but mostly the Roma are now sedentary. So a recent gene sequencing study established that the Romani diaspora comes from India, a single population that originated in northwestern India about 1,500 years ago. It's the red spot on the map. The Indian origin of Roma was actually established nearly 2.5 centuries ago through a linguistic comparison of Romani with Indian and European languages. And this becomes important later on, and I'll make reference to it. So after a rapid migration from the near Middle East, the European spread of the Romani people was via the Balkans mainly about 900 years ago. So in Byzantium, yes, well, this is a later slide. But first about the Byzantium, because this is important, because that's where the Roma got some of the names that are used still today, right? Two basic terms that came into existence. One is Tsiganos, and that's the term that sort of brought out the Slavic language terms like Tsigan in Slovak and Czech, Tsigan in German, Tzigana, like Italian Zigana, and so on. And then we have Aikutos from Egypt, which is the basis of the English term gypsy, or Spanish gitano, or French gitano. This poster is reportedly from Wallachia or Moldavia, present-day Romania, where most of the Roma were either in bondage or declared slaves, essentially by the end of the 14th century, and then remained slaves there until the abolition of bondage in 1856. So that was a long period of slavery for the Roma there. In other places in Europe at the time, first they were very quickly known and attracted immense attention, but after a short time of being welcomed, settled city populations tried to keep the Roma away from the city. So this is already where the spatial segregation started. So the better known the Roma were becoming, the more chilly the reception. And they were flat out, in many places, denied access to towns. Then, later on, they were accused of being spies for Turks. And that's where the first persecutions started at the beginning of the 16th century. And they essentially happened everywhere. There are anti-Roma laws passed, and persecution was pretty severe. So in Germany, for example, there were some policies that were trying to get citizens to catch and kill Roma, even in parties like public entertainment where the Roma were hunted with game. In France, it wasn't as bad. Well, if you were Roma and a man, you were consigned to the galleys, even if you really didn't do anything wrong. In the Netherlands, they had heathen hunts as well. Portugal expelled many Roma to Brazil and Africa. Spain had both exile and forced assimilation, and there was one event called Black Wednesday, where between 9,000 and 12,000 Roma were killed. And in England, the Roma were also captured, branded, and enslaved. So this is pretty dim history. Later on in Enlightenment, they figured out that the persecution like that wasn't really working, so instead they tried to forcibly settle and assimilate the Roma. And policies for forcible assimilation were mostly happening in Spain and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and they were essentially decreed by the state, and included attempts in Spain, for example. They were trying to forbid the use of Romani language. They separated parents and children. They committed the children to orphanages, and they sent men and women to different workhouses. In the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Maria Theresia, and then also her son afterwards, continued forcible assimilation. And she did that through 4 decrees that essentially forced the Roma to first sedentarize, right, give up the itinerant lifestyle, give up their name and their way of life, it prohibited marriages between Roma, and then she also forced all Romani children who were younger than, older than 5 to be taken away and given essentially to Hungarian families. So after that, if we're jumping ahead quite a bit, we arrive at these registration efforts. There are earlier registration efforts, and they happen in Austria, where the Roma were not allowed to leave. They were not allowed to immigrate. They had to essentially stay where they were. And then they were counted and registered. At this point, they were taking fingerprints and photographs, and they were putting all the Romani names into a gypsy index. Again, the quotes, right? Tzigana Kaptatik. And that identified about 8,000 Roma by their same time, actually the same year, this registry was being compiled. Jack Reinhardt switched from the banjo to the guitar following the fire that destroyed one of his hands. And so he started his signature style of the jazz, just to make sure that the story of Rommel, quite terrible, is known. But now here we are. So the Prerequisite is a Romany word for the devouring, and it's their own name for the Holocaust that happened to them. Now, when I'm talking about this, I'm not just going to be talking about the actual events that happened toward the end of World War II. I'll be talking about events that led up to it, because I think they're important for the way things happen later on, and I think they can also be linked to some practices that still happen today. So the first of those are early camps. So in some places, but not others, right, the Roma were still itinerant, not in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, because of the forcible assimilation policies, not really. But in Germany, for example, the Roma were still itinerant. And the Roman caravans were a source of nuisance, especially in the inner cities. So in the winter months, the Roma were able to stay in municipal camps, and some of those were being called concentration camps at that point, that were built mostly in the early 1930s in urban renewal efforts. And these efforts mainly tried to rid the cities of unwanted elements. I think the first camp that was built with this intention, that was actually called a concentration camp, was in Frankfurt. There was another one in Berlin that they built in order to clean the city for the Summer Olympics in 1936. This sounds a bit familiar, I think, even given what happens in some places today for the Olympics. So some Roma were able to bring their caravans to these camps, and many who stayed in those camps were poor. So the Roma who were better off didn't go to these camps, right? They lived in houses and better lodgings, so they were spared that. The camps were guarded by policemen, or police officers. The Roma had to sign in and sign out if they wanted to leave. There was no begging, but there was very, very modest welfare, sort of also, there were welfare payments. Nonetheless, conditions were very harsh. And once the war started, the character of these camps changed drastically. And people weren't able to leave, of course. So the next term that's important here is asociality. Who is asocial? Asocial are people who demonstrate by their conduct, even if it's not criminal, but they are unwilling to adapt to the life of the community. So, early efforts at crime prevention tried to curb beggars, vagabonds, vagrants, which is essentially Roma with vagrants. At least that's what they meant. Prostitutes and pimps who engaged in petty crimes that violated the system of order established by the national social state. In addition to them, also people who were work shy. And so the work shy are persons without a criminal record who sought to escape the duty to work and became dependent for their support for life of the public. So what they tried to do is put these people, the asocials, into preventive custody, especially people who were without a permanent residence. So the Roma were swept up in this group, especially if they were itinerant, but often also if they were not. So there are records, files of individuals that essentially state this person has not been involved in a criminal activity, but still they ended up in camp. There's not much explanation as to why often in these cases. So here we come to the first interesting issue, if we can call it interesting, like all of this is horrifying. But nonetheless, right, so the Roma were not explicitly targeted because of their ethnic identity. They were, it's quite clear that they were, as a group, by definition, strongly represented here in this group of asocials, right? What other group is itinerant by definition? Right, there's another group called Yenische, I think that's how you pronounce it. They're the white gypsies, again, but pretty much everyone else who was in the group of asocials, they were in this group as individuals, not as members of a particular group, ethnic or otherwise. So the Roma, yes, sure, they were not targeted on the grounds of their ethnic identity, but they were targeted on the grounds of their way of life. And for most, if not all, their way of life was closely tied to their ethnic identity. So it's almost, if we say, oh, the Roma were not targeted because of their ethnic identity, it's almost like you're saying, oh, we're not targeting Muslim women, we're targeting women who wear scarves on their heads. And you may have women who wear scarves in that group who are not Muslim, but that doesn't mean that one particular group is not disproportionately more targeted than another. So the asocials had their uniforms marked with a black triangle. They worked in work camps, mostly in large stone quarries. Treatment was brutal. In the hierarchy, they were above Jews and homosexuals, but I'm not sure that says much. And so these are the camps that housed Roma during this preventive custody period. So by 1939, there were over 10,000 asocials in those camps. But we don't have a good count on how many Roma were among those 10,000. So given, however, that the Romani itinerant lifestyle qualified them as asocial, and that there were no other groups who were similarly qualified in this way, we can suspect the numbers of Roma among the asocials were reasonably. And some were let go after 1 year, but many stayed and many died. And so these camps sort of stepped up. The camps stepped to a new level of arbitrary and systematic oppression. Now, if we go back a little bit to think about why the Roma were targeted, I would like to speak in this context to animus. So what is animus? I want to define it quickly. So it's hatred directed at someone because that person is a member of a particular group. Right? There's no other reason. Particular grievance, you could have personal grievances or a bad experience, but that doesn't matter, right? Animus is purely hatred on the basis of some sort of identity. Now, by the mid-1930s, the Roma had been verbally abused for centuries, not just decades, centuries. And this type of abuse is insidious. It develops between people. It's seen in everyday interactions and repeated over and over again, and then it's spread and strengthened by the media. So in 1936, the media got worse. They were involved, right? And then people felt feared to speak openly against the Roma, and actually vehemently demanded that a final solution to the gypsy problem be devised. Now, this differs substantially from the process by which the Jewish population was targeted. Right there, the origins of victimization were top-down. It was top-down animus. But people were gleeful to see Jews suffer, but they didn't overwhelmingly demand their demise like they did for the Roma. Right, for the Roma, this was completely different. So demands for annihilation were bottom-up, coming from everyday citizens, public officials, academics, publicists, and many of those people were not actually members of the Nazi Party at all. So after that, Himmler's decree included, and it's a decree in 1938, included language that spoke of the gypsy problem in terms of the inner characteristics of that race. So, formally then, the Roma were not targeted because of their ethnic identity. They were targeted because they were in the group of asocials. But now, the discourse changed. Right now, they were considered targeted because they were racially unclean. At the same time, Hitler was less concerned with the Roma. Now, explanations for that differ, but it's possible that he was less concerned because he didn't see them as much of a threat as he saw the Jewish population. There were also many fewer Roma in Germany at the time. I have some numbers here, which again, grain of salt, right? But this estimate here says that in 1933 there were about 500,000 Jews in Germany, but only 26,000 Roma. So that's a big difference. So comparatively, right, that may be the reason why Hitler was comparatively less concerned with the Roman population. That doesn't mean they weren't, but they weren't a priority. So then Hitler's decree combating the gypsy plague that resulted in a number of registration efforts where they tried to figure out who were Roma, who weren't Roma, right? Put that down in their IDs, make sure that everybody was registered. They counted the registration papers for itinerant business and driver's licenses. They were only given out after careful checks. You couldn't get camping permits easily. There was regulation of marriages and prohibition of traveling in hordes. There's a case of two Roman men, I believe, being arrested because they were traveling in a horde. Hordes too. So that arbitrary story, I guess, the arbitrary treatment speaks to the fact that there was actually no law that provided legal foundation for these measures as they were enacted. There were decrees, but then besides that, the Nazis preferred to do things only by decrees because they wanted to have as much flexibility and arbitrary power as possible, especially because they wanted to pursue radical measures and because the Roma, as they were, some of them were actually quite diverse and they needed to be able to differentiate between them. And this is what I mean. So this goes way back. You know, when I talk about the Roma coming from India and their origins being tied to Indo-European languages. So turns out the Roma are Aryan, and that was a problem. So let me back up a bit here. So marriages between Roma and Germans were already banned in 1933. Those were the measures to prevent the pollution of German blood. Now, to resolve the question of who is Roma and who isn't, the government founded the Research Institute in 1936, headed by Robert Bracic, who was essentially the foremost expert on the Roma. So the data collected in this institute were to be used by other agencies in addressing the Roma problem. The people who worked for Ritter in this institute essentially traveled all over. They traveled in cities and the countryside. They went through all of the camps, the labor camp, the concentration camps, and the prisons, and tried to collect as much information as possible on the Roma. So they were registering them, they were taking fingerprints, they were taking blood samples, measurements, and tried to construct genealogy. And the Roma who refused to participate were threatened with a concentration camp. So by 1939, they had complete information on 20,000 Roma. So the reason for doing that, besides trying to pin them down and figuring out where they were, especially because, you know, if they were still moving around, was because they needed to figure out who was truly Aryan and who wasn't. So they were trying to work with groups to answer the Aryan dilemma. Ritter resolved this dilemma, right? You have a big dilemma when you have people that are supposedly Aryan and you're supposed to be protecting them because they are what you deem superior, and yet at the same time you want to get rid of them, right? So how do you resolve this? So in comes Ritter, does his research, and comes up with the following solution. He says that by that point, only about 10% of Roma were actually racially pure, so purely Aryan. The rest were Mishliga, right? Mishliga are mixed blood, so some Roma blood and some non-Roma, probably German blood. So this made it possible to differentiate between them, and so the pure Roma, the pure Aryans, were to be spared, but the Mishliga were not. And this is precisely the opposite of the policy on the Jewish population, so it makes absolutely no sense. Not that the other one does, but it seems very much pseudoscience. So that was Ritter's solution to this problem, to this question of the Aryan dilemma. Now, the decrees and policy decisions that followed didn't actually perfectly work with his solution. There was a fair amount of confusion and inconsistency. So some decrees protected pure Roma, but others also protected Mishliga with little Roma blood and were socially adjusted. So the benefit of this confusion, of course, is that more people were able to survive. Small persons. So this is a picture of autobiographical papers. He was not a member of the Nazi Party, but he had extremely nationalist views. So before I go on to discussing the most drastic measures, I just want to spend a bit of time talking about other measures of exclusion and control. So one of them happened in schools, both in Austria and in Germany. So they were trying to separate children, and so at first they put the Roma children into separate classes and then into separate special schools. They did that because the Roma students constituted a moral or other danger to children of German blood, and eventually all Romani students were expelled from schools, so they cut education for the Roma altogether. Then there was compulsory labor and work camps, where essentially if you exhibited habits that were irregular, you were sent to a concentration camp as a Roma. Marriages between Roma and Germans were banned already earlier, and marriages between Roma themselves were also heavily regulated later, which essentially means that, so as they call them, right, the Roma with mixed blood were not allowed to marry. If they married, according to Romani custom, their marriage was not recognized. So if a couple were to marry and then live together and possibly have children, they were branded as asocials and then at a very high risk of being put into a concentration camp. So either way, the marriages between Roma were severely condemned. Other things also, there was high level of taxation. They had to pay 50% taxes, and in Serbia, for example, they were barred from theaters, swimming pools, restaurants, public markets, and had to wear a yellow armband marked gypsy. With the marriages, there was an interesting exception that leads into the main policy of the Nazis and exterminating the Roma, which is this: if you agreed to be sterilized voluntarily, you could marry. So, sterilization in Germany was initially for hereditarily sick and insane, but it soon expanded. At the time, this was practiced elsewhere, right? In the US and Sweden and so on. Sweden actually sterilized asocials well after World War II. But the difference is that in the US, for example, during the 24-year period after sterilization became legal, a bit over 12,000 people were sterilized. In Nazi Germany, the first year alone, in 1 year, there were over 43,000 victims. So by the time the war started, 300,000 persons were sterilized. So that's a lot more. So the practice expanded in 1936. So the use of intelligence tests as determining who should be sterilized and who shouldn't became less prominent, and instead social failure became a viable criteria. What is social failure? Not going to school, not enrolling in a special school, divorce, children out of wedlock, lack of occupation, reliance on welfare, and itinerant lifestyle. So the Roma, again, were more likely to be swept up in this than other populations. And it goes further. First of all, they defined asocial as moral mental retardation. So that group was taken care of. Then they also had to take care of the individuals who couldn't quite fit. So Ritter came up with the following. He came up with the concept of disguised mental retardation, which is that he identified it in young Romani children who were independent and quick talkers. And he called that a mask of cleverness, which disguised mental retardation. So it seems that really no one was spared when it comes to the Roma. So there are no reliable figures again, but extrapolation suggests that the Roma were sterilized at a much higher than normal percentage when compared to the general population. Once the war started, because resources were scarce, or needed to be redirected somewhere else, sterilizations decreased to those absolutely necessary, except for the Roma. For the Roma, they increased. In fact, this was the main method of planned extermination through the Roma. So while killings in the camps were methodically carried out, they weren't as carefully planned out as the attempts to exterminate for mass sterilization. That was the number one method of trying to get rid of the Roma. Speaking of camps, so because of the Aryan dilemma, there was a fair amount of disagreement as to the severity of initial measures intended to exterminate the Roma. So the higher-ups were not as concerned with the Roma. They had other priorities at the time, but still it was fairly clear that something needed to be done. Ritter, for example, and many others disagreed with the less extreme plan and called for measures that would resolve the problem in the long run, and suggested putting a social Tigran mission at least into the work camps and essentially treating them the same way as the Jews in all respects. That didn't quite work. So instead, what happened with the first expulsion of the Roma is they took them to the general government in Poland in 1940s, and some of them went into camps, but not all. Others went into ghettos, and others yet into towns and cities in the east, and many died. So there were temporary camps created on the way, and there again was a fair amount of confusion because the policy wasn't clear. Essentially what happened was there were other priorities happening at the same time. What needed to be done was this. They needed to get rid of the Roma so that they would go away, and they needed to make sure that they would be back. And because there were comparatively low numbers of Roma, they weren't immediately concerned with killing them at that point. So the priority first was to just get rid of them, have them go to the east. This plays again into the challenge of identifying the Roma. They had a hard time figuring out who was Roma and who wasn't. And that's possibly why deportations were not as efficient and quick as they could have been, or as perhaps they wanted them to be. Again, small mercies. Racially pure Roma and some other categories of Michigan were exempt from deportation, but of those exempt, again, everybody but the racially pure were urged to consent to sterilization. So either you were deported or sterilized, essentially. Consent was sought, but not necessary. It was often distracted under duress, usually a threat of deportation to a concentration camp. So, according to Himmler, another grisly detail, the racially pure or good Michigan was spared for the purpose of preserving the culture as a kind of live museum or as rare animals. That's what he said. So I have some numbers now, right? As I say under there, the estimates are uncertain. They're likely much, much higher. So take that with a grain of salt. And when I speak about these numbers, maybe consider the group as a whole in terms of thinking about the proportion that lived, the proportion that died as indicative of a larger trend. So, for example, in 1941, 5,000 Roma from Burgenland, Austria, were transported to the Lodz ghetto. And 1942, 4,400 of them were killed in the gas vans, so Kilno. And actually, that was just sort of a one wave of killings, right? In the end, all of them actually ended up dying. So of the Roma that were counted in Burgenland, so before Anschluss, there were 8,000 Roma there, and afterwards, of those who were counted, 870 returned, and of those, 650 had been in camps and survived. So those are just the ones that were registered. That's for the Roma, from Germany and Austria, right? In other places, treatment was different. So in the Soviet lands, for example, Romani people, women, children, all were summarily executed upon sight because they were considered to be Soviet spies. So there was no mercy there whatsoever. In Serbia, the Roma were swept up in the revenge killings that happened in response to German soldiers or Nazi soldiers dying, and the policy was 100 people die for each German soldier who dies. So they did that until they got up to about 11,164, and then they started running out of people, so they changed the policy to 50 awarded for each German soldier who dies. And estimates vary more than between 1,000 and 20,000 Roma died that way. So in 1943, fairly late, deportations to Auschwitz started. So the first one was 13,000 Roma that were taken to the Gypsy family camp. That's the family camp. The reason why it was called a family camp is because the families were able to stay together there. And then from Czechoslovakia, 4,386, according to this one source, were in local camps in Leti and Podolia, and later on they were also transported to the Auschwitz family camp. Now, eventually 23,000 Roma were to be in that camp, this one conservative source. Their fate was uncertain because they were not gassed on arrival, as some other operations were, and many did not work in the beginning. So there wasn't a comprehensive initial plan to annihilate the Roma the same way before the deportation started, and there was some confusion as to what the policy was. But in the end, right, if we look just at this group for which I have information, up to 23,000 that were there, 5,600 went into the gas chambers, 3,500 went to other camps where they died, and 14,000 died from disease, medical experiments, and guard killings. So pretty much everyone, right? So proportionally, this is what they're saying. So those who were in other camps, about 5,000, based on a conservative source, they were part of many experiments. So saltwater in Dachau, freezing experiments, anti-typhus experiments, and the other camps, sterilizations. There were mass sterilizations. They would sterilize 100 women or girls per month, which went hand in hand with the other extermination policy. So essentially, there is no exact count of how many Roma died at the hands of the Nazis. Very conservative estimates put this number at 23,000. Some estimate around 90,000, others again at 200,000, and some at 500,000. But the truth is there's no exact count, right? All we have are estimates. Regardless, the treatment was horrific, like the suffering at the hands of Nazis. I don't think anyone can argue that was not horrible. Now, while there were no orders, perhaps, before deportation started, to massively kill the Roma once they got to the camps, mass murder happened later, and the Roma were methodically killed. And then the massive sterilizations, which were essentially the first order of business in terms of trying to exterminate the Roma, were extensive. And perhaps because of the sterilizations, because of the focus on that, some scholars call this a delayed genocide, right? So the effects of killing often people are not immediately visible because they don't die right away, but surely the ethnic group dies quickly thereafter in the next generation because they're not able to have children. So sterilization or killing, the losses suffered by the Roma at the hands of Nazis were just horrendous. I would like to highlight a few of the things I think that we don't tend to focus much on, but are actually quite important too. So the treatment by the Nazis resulted in a lot of cultural trauma. So besides, discrimination and terrible physical realities of the treatment, things like prohibitions of being seen naked in public or ritual purity that existed culturally, right? That was horribly violated. The elders, who were protectors and of cultural heritage who pass it on, were killed, and finally, sterilizations, right? Children in Roman culture are one of the most valued things. They define the standing of families, both men and women. So the standing depends on how many children you can have. So mass sterilizations essentially took that away from entire communities, right, and caused trauma that that was just immense. And the Roma weren't really comfortable talking about it either. Arguably, sterilizing communities, it may be the absolutely worst thing one can do to the Roma because of the cultural meaning of children. And we all have children, but I think for the Roma, it's a little bit different. So the immediate aftermath. Roma were not involved and testified. Most who were for restitution during the early post-war years were turned down on the grounds that they were not targeted for their ethnicity, but for their sexuality. So the compensation law of 1953 did not include Roma as victims who were entitled to restitution. Then the revised version in 1963 did. But Roma ran into difficulties trying to apply for it. They're trouble talking about it. Many were illiterate. Those support from doctors who were supposed to certify the damage that was done, those support from lawyers. And finally, authorities didn't recognize Roma marriage, so families could not apply for restitution for the members of their families that had died. So even after they were recognized as victims, there were problems. Victims of sterilization were not eligible because sterilization was not seen as causing any diminishing of the ability to earn a living. But, of course, many victims had serious psychological problems because of the cultural relevance of children that I just mentioned. And then in 1980, there was a one-time payment, and some additional measures were added later to compensate for loss of earning ability if they could be proven. Of the main perpetrators, one was hanged for an unrelated reason, one was sentenced to life imprisonment, one received 1 year, but none of the members of Ritter's team were brought to trial at all, right? So the people who collected the lists, the people who advocated for the most terrible measures, walked. Finally, there was a big farm bill at the site of the Lety concentration camps. That was one of the big two concentration camps in Czech Republic, where the Roma were first held before they were taken off to Auschwitz. They built a big farm, and it stands there still today. This is Roma protesting. The big farm, they're holding pictures of their family members who have either gone through this or died there. And they say it's absolutely horrific. This is another purpose. Because I don't know if you've been near a pig farm ever, but they scream. So the screams at night are really horrendous as they're essentially reminiscent of the screams of the people who died there. And so it's still there today. So, because the Roma have faced discrimination and hatred and animus for centuries before the genocide, it's hard to pinpoint that something is particularly due to the genocide and not older hatred. There are plenty of direct legacies, like giving to your children the psychological and cultural trauma that comes with that, right? But I would like to focus on another set of issues that one may refer to as legacies as well. And there are things that are done to the Roma today that were done back then. So things that continue to happen today. And I would like to start this portion of the video.
It's a cold Saturday morning and some of the Roma have come to church in the white part of town. They've come for the wedding of Rosalia and Radislav. Just as soon as the white Slovaks leave the church, the wedding will begin. Rosalia Rosalia and Radislav have been together for 8 years and have 2 young daughters. To their great sadness and disappointment, this marriage will not be blessed with any more children. Rosalia's youngest child, Yitka, was born 6 years ago. Rosalia clearly remembers the day when her labour began and she was taken to hospital.
No am putut nici nevoie szpitale, kiedy mam infekcję, próbę napituje czekam teraz. No putut nie știu to, avarele mi pune se vednează na cesarske.
As far as Rosalia knew, there were no problems with the birth. Both she and her baby were healthy. However, as the years wore on, Rosalia became increasingly perplexed as to why she never fell pregnant again. The mystery ended when this woman came into her life. Barbara Bukovska is a lawyer based in Prague in the Czech Republic. She's one of the authors of a report that has rocked Slovakia. This report confirmed long-standing claims that Roma women are being sterilised without their full consent.
Usually it's happening on the delivery table. That woman is brought to the hospital, she's in delivery, and for whatever reason she has to have a cesarean section, with anesthesia. And then she is undergoing cesarean section, and then during the cesarean section her fallopian tubes are tied.
Last year, Barbara Bukovska led a team of researchers to some of the Roma settlements in Slovakia. From an extremely small sample, they found over 100 cases of women who'd been sterilised in questionable circumstances. It's believed that these 100 cases are just the tip of the iceberg.
But as for sterilization, we found out that it's not isolated incident. It's not incident that would be limited to one hospital or one doctor. It's a practice, and it's a practice that's been continuing in Slovakia for decades.
On behalf of some women, Barbara gained access to their medical files.
Yeah, this is how they mark the files with R. So for instance, this one, so R, that she's logged in.
It was in these files that Barbara discovered the answer to the question haunting women like Rosalia.
So there were cases where women told you they didn't know why they couldn't conceive, and then you check their files.
And there was a little check with sterilization, like this one.
This is Rosalia's file. With Rosalia's permission, Barbara had checked her medical records at the hospital where she last gave birth. Barbara came to Homenotsa to deliver the bad news.
Tak Barbara prišla, mi povedala, tak zabrala na bok a mi povedala, že tam bola zistiť to monokartie a tam bolo napísané, že ja som si to žiadala sama, že by mi zobrali, že by som už nemala dieťa. No, že vôbec nič.
Rosalia then had to pass on the news to her partner, Radislav.
Comunque molto bene. Non volevo... Perché sotto la bola non era tutto bene.
Mám radosť, keď místo, že ešte budeme mať, keď sa to počulo, takže som mu rečovala, že už nebudem mať. No zostal taký prekvapený, nepovedal nič nad tým. Smutný bol.
While Rosalia's file says she consented to being sterilised and has a signature that purports to be hers, she says this is not true.
Doktor vôbec nič nevysvetlil. Tak pýtal sa, aké meno tam, no som varila, keď chlapec bude Robert, no a keď diče Jitka. A veci si už nepamätám. To niečo tam. Danielov. Na Korzovi, Mexide, a potom sa nepamätám.
Podpisał asi nejaký dokument, papier, preklad alebo kooperácii?
Nič, Primeiro trovare proiecte da semeno tutto che finisce da me dovrà aiutare sami.
Thank you. It's working. All right. So, great. Most information about coercive sterilizations or sterilizations with consent that was given under duress, essentially in the final stages of labor, comes from Slovakia and Czech Republic. So there were policies of sterilization there during the communist regime, but also after. The Czech ombudsman estimates that the number of Romani women so sterilized is in the thousands. In Slovakia, for example, during the 1980s, about 1,000 Romani women are said to have been sterilized per year. So in 2004 and 5, 87 victims of coercive sterilization in Czech Republic submitted complaints to the Czech Public Defender of Rights. In 2009, the Czech Prime Minister expressed his regret over instances of coerced sterilization which have occurred in the country. By the end of 2014, the women have received no compensation. That's where it is today. Czech Republic and Slovakia are not the only states with a recent history of eugenic measures as they apply to the Roma. Sweden, for example, forcibly sterilized Roma quite extensively, but reportedly only until 1976. So sterilization, obviously, is one of the most harrowing examples of present-day Roma rights violations. I mean, this is how the Nazis sought to eliminate the Roma. This was the #1 strategy. And the method they chose is still applied today. Well, at least it has been until very recently, and might still be applied elsewhere today. I've read many testimonies from other Eastern European states or Central European states where this still happens. Maybe not as extensively as in Czech Republic and Slovakia, but it does. So, recent acknowledgments of the practice appeared, they at least give a sense that perhaps this practice is diminishing or decreasing if it hasn't stopped. But the lack of compensation to the victims or anything else is also telling. So there are other things that happen today that are eerily reminiscent of what happened during or before, rather, the collapse. So segregation in education is one of those things. So what I'm showing you are numbers from 2004. So things may have changed until now. By now, but sadly not substantially. Before I go on, a word on special schools. So special schools are schools for mentally disabled children. That's what it means. So this report from 2004 documents segregation in education in the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Germany, France, Spain, Denmark, and the UK. In some of these countries, rates of segregation are very high. In some places in Germany, for example, it says up to 80% of Roma go to segregated schools. Now, why do Roma go to segregated schools? Segregation is driven by financial incentives for schools. There are also financial incentives for Romani parents in some locations, and since Roma who are targeted tend to be predominantly poor, this is a vital thing to do to a family, to offer them money to send their child to a special school if they have no other choice. Parents are neither sufficiently informed nor empowered to resist segregation. Data from a study in Serbia that looked at 31 segregated schools in 2013, so very recently, showed that 44% of the parents didn't know what the assessment intended to determine where the child would go to school was actually trying to do. 75%, so 3 out of 4, were not informed that they had a right to be present during the assessment. 3 out of 4 were not informed about the limitations and consequences of special education. And 3 out of 4 did not know that they had a right to refuse the opinion of the commission and then send their child to a mainstream school anyway. Another factor that is very strong in enforcing these segregation measures is anti-Roma sentiment among parents of non-Roma children. Right, that results in pressures towards schools to segregate because parents essentially put a lot of pressure. They organize and then they threaten with white plot that they will take children out of schools if they have Romani classmates, and they do. They do take their children out. And another interesting detail. So I don't have information on the language that's used in the testing that determines whether Romani children should be placed in special schools. But many of them are described as having mild mental disabilities. There's more information because of this survey in Serbia on what happens when students transfer from mainstream schools to special schools. This usually happens after first grade in primary school, so when kids are really young. So out of the people in Serbia interviewed who had their children transferred, 42% of interviewees list difficulty to concentrate, and 60% list restlessness among the reasons that were given to them for their child's transfer. Absenteeism, low grades, and bullying are also listed. 50% also reported that the child was ignored and placed to sit in the back of the classroom. So I'm not saying that it's the same thing, but I do wonder if the children described by Ritter decades ago as having disguised mental retardation, right? Those were the children with independent and quick thinking and talking. If those are similar to those today who are described as having difficulties concentrating and being restless, right? There's some parallels here that we may be able to draw, or at least think about. So, several measures have been taken to try to resolve this issue. NGO-led strategic litigation at the European Court of Human Rights has resulted in several decisions that are helpful. They've led to the development of legislation and policy changes in the areas of desegregation. There have also been grassroots efforts that have led to changes. In Romania, for example, Romani creates an NGO, trains student monitors to contribute to documentation of discrimination. In the Czech Republic, an NGO called Life Together works on parental engagement and community empowerment. These are some kids from Romania. So nonetheless, much remains to be done, right? Segregation at numbers as high as the ones I listed, up to 80% in places in Germany and 75% in the Czech Republic. This is a structural problem. Strategic litigation and NGO efforts sort of attack it from top down and bottom up, but something bigger will be necessary to truly uproot it. To illustrate a bit on the white flight phenomenon, a recent year barometer study from 2012 on discrimination asked a sample of people from 27 European Union states, so the entire Union, if they think that their fellow countrymen, right, people of the same nationality as they are, would feel comfortable if their child was in the same classroom with a Romani child. And 34% said that they think that their co-countrymen would not feel comfortable. In Slovakia, for example, the answers to that question were definitely 58% of people said that they thought that fellow Slovaks would not feel comfortable. So this answer, right, illustrates a bit on public opinion, right? And this leads me into the next problem that has really not changed much either over time. And this is animus, right? Individual level hatred leveled at a group or a person because of the membership in a particular group. Anti-Roma sentiment is so universal that sometimes we don't even think about it, right? People here in the US, people will often say, I feel gypped, or I was gypped, without really thinking about what that means. But think about what it really means, right? It's ingrained. So animus that's so ingrained then results in daily violations. They can be large or small in many different social settings. So for example, because individuals are bigoted, Roma can experience a higher level of police brutality, and not because police brutality is mandated. In the European Union, of course, it's not mandated. But individual police officers may feel that they can do it with impunity. Roma often experience administrative discrimination. We don't think much of that one, but it's quite insidious. So, for example, they have difficulty obtaining personal documents. This happens when bureaucrats will refuse to help the Roma with necessary paperwork or even send them to the wrong place. So Roma are directed from one wrong office to the next wrong office, and so on, in search for an application for a personal document until they give up. This happened, for example, in Czech Republic and Slovakia, when Czechoslovakia split and citizens had to apply for citizenship. And certain bureaucrats would send Roma from Czech Republic or from Slovakia to the other place, saying, "Oh, you're not Czech, you're Slovak. You should get citizenship there," and vice versa, right? So these groups of Roma were going back and forth, unable to get citizenship, and that happened for quite a while until it was stopped, and the responsible people were reprimanded. There's actually a running joke in the NGO community in Central and Eastern Europe that the easiest personal document for a Roma to obtain is the birth certificate. No trouble. And then, of course, besides that, we have discrimination in education, employment, access to healthcare, and so on, right? Education I've already touched on. Then we have employment. When she was showing those records of women in hospitals with the big R, right? The offices do the same, so they will put a big red R on a job application, so that everybody knows who applied. In healthcare, Romani women who go and give birth in hospitals are put into Roma rooms where other non-Roma are not put, and they're not able to use restrooms that are meant for non-Roma women. And they're often subjected to frequent changes of shoes, which are humiliating, implying that they're dirty. So, other things that are sort of based on animals, barred entry. For example, barred entry to bars, public swimming pools, restaurants. Actually, in 2006, half of the public campsites in Sweden were not open to Roma. Here I have a picture of Czech anti-Roma rally. These are mostly neo-Nazis protesting the Roma. And finally, speaking to animals, is this another graph from the Eurobarometer in 2012, where people were asked if they believed that society would benefit from better integration of Roma, and 53% of respondents agreed, 33% did not. So another thing that matches terribly well the actions during the Prerequisite are the expulsions, right? The expulsions have only recently flared up in Western Europe, and this is largely because of the higher numbers of Roma immigrating. They're from Central and Eastern Europe after the Eastern European Union enlargements. So the most notable expulsions came from France and Italy. So under Sarkozy, for example, almost 10,000 Roma were expelled from France. Now Hollande's administration that followed, even though it condemned Sarkozy's actions, just kept doing the same. So for example, between June and August 2011, 500 Roma were evicted just from camps in Marseille, right? I'm not even looking at the entire country. Italy engages in expulsions as well. They have a terrible practice of going over to settlement with bulldozers and completely just destroying the living spaces. So between March and May 2011, 1,800 Roma were affected by expulsions in Italy. Denmark deported Roma, fewer, but they did. And even though these expulsions have really been flaring up recently, it's not the first time that it happened in the context of, sort of recent events that plagued the Roma. In 2001, the UK posted additional immigration officers and additional passport checks in the main airport in Prague, in Czech Republic. And what they were doing is they were screening for the Roma who were bound to England, and they barred them from boarding the planes, even though they had tickets and they were perfectly allowed to travel. The reason why they did it, one of the explanations, besides the denials that came afterward, was that almost 100% of asylum seekers in the UK who come from the Czech Republic are Roma. So the Czechs were likely intended to keep the Roma from coming to the UK where they could apply for asylum. The funny part there is that this action received a lot of press because some of the people who were denied travel were not Roma, and that was very bad indeed. So these are some different images of travel back and forth. Some by choice and some sadly not. Now the final matching practice is ghettoization. So while many Roma successfully live among the general population, right, and those are somewhat invisible, most live in isolated settlements, often in slums. Within cities, many live in what is essentially ghettos. Even that is actually becoming a smaller population because of evictions. So the Roma are being evicted from housing or entire municipalities, and they're being forced more and more to relocate to isolated settlements on the outskirts of towns. Now, these settlements are often without sewage, electricity, waste removal, and heat, and often they have none of these characteristics at all. For example, some of my sites where I've been, and in my field work, I've seen dwellings made out of shipping containers, or just a mattress and a tarp, and that was it. So these settlements are often removed from schools, postal services, healthcare, and other urban facilities, and don't have public transportation, right? And if all the Roma live in a settlement, the police can target a settlement really easily, as can citizens who may want to target the Roma, neo-Nazi or not, and that happens quite a bit. So this is what it may look like. This is a particularly bad example of a living situation. This one is much better. But these are all from settlements. So in many cases, public opinion by non-Roma, really animus, helps reinforce segregation, not only through discrimination, but also through more institutionalized measures. So for example, there have been a number of walls built by municipal leaders in Central and Eastern Europe to physically separate a Roma neighborhood from the rest of the town. I'm going to show you one example of this wall. So this wall is from Romania, from Baia Mare. In 2011, the mayor of Baia Mare built a 6-foot wall to separate the Roma neighborhood from the main road. This is the wall being built, so it's in the process of being built. The year after that, so in 2012, during the election campaign, the same mayor forcefully relocated over 90 Romani families from their settlement, so they were already in the settlement, to abandoned buildings belonging to a defunct chemical factory. So soon thereafter, many Roma from those families, predominantly children, became ill, reportedly in response to chemical exposure. The outcome of this is terrible. The mayor won the election with 86% of the vote after having done that. So, I want to be clear. So the Roma today face much higher variety of rights violations than that I've just included here. I've only mentioned them because they seem to be so directly related to what happened before the violence and during. So to me, this is a powerful juxtaposition, right? Many reactions to the horrors of the Holocaust are along the lines of never again, and they should be. But it seems that we betray ourselves in this. If the global community is committed to this, how then do we tolerate these actions as they continue today. Just take one of them, right? How can coercive sterilization, identical to the practice that aimed for a delayed genocide, still happen to the Roma in the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s? And once it's acknowledged and once apologies are issued, like in the Czech Republic 5 years ago, the victims are not compensated. And this is exactly what happens to those who suffered the same treatment under the Nazis. And even they received restitution, even though it was a one-time payment and utterly insufficient given the harm done. Right? So why are these new victims not the same? So given the inequalities and indignities that the Roma suffer today, it's difficult to be positive. But there is progress. There's commitment by the EU to do better. And that includes stronger requirements for improving the treatment of Roma in candidate states, as well as other more Roma inclusion initiatives. There are decisions coming from the European Court of Human Rights that condemn discrimination. And there are some changes to legislation and policy that follow those decisions. And finally, there is a lot of undue effort, some exceptional, that fights for Roma rights. So hopefully things are looking up. Thank you so much for coming.
You know, we sterilized quite a few Native Americans and African Americans in this country, and in fact, in the hospital I worked at in the 1970s, we had to stop a doctor in Oakland from sterilizing teenage black girls. He had to have him censured and then eventually fired. He was doing it on his own. He was from Poland, by the way.
So there may have been a legacy there. Yeah, but there's still doctors that do it. I have examples from, we can talk about examples in Croatia, where individuals will do it. It's not as systematic, right? As in Czech Republic or Slovakia, it might seem to be more of a practice, right? But, you know, your example and my examples from Croatia seem to be just certain individuals who will take matters into their own hands. Yeah.
South, it still exists quite a bit in our South.
In recent years, in the past decade, 15 years, we've seen a significant rise in neo-fascist movements in southern and eastern Europe, and especially in Hungary a couple years ago, an old anti-communist fascist party sort of recoalesced and has been really one of the sort of crime groups that has been violently antagonizing the Romani populations in Hungary. How do you see that problem sort of going forward? Is it something that is just a current minor blip, given the rough economic situation, or is this something maybe a little bit more serious on the order of fascist movements that we had seen in the 1930s and 20s?
So I've talked to a few experts on these movements. So what they say generally is that these movements come in waves. So one will show up in one country and then another one, and they will sort of pop up. And then there will be a wave of a movement like that, and then it will die down. So that is what the experts that I've talked to would say to that. However, Hungary, I think, is a slightly different example right now because things have gone quite far. Right, in terms of not just anti-Roma sentiment, but also anti-Semitism. I wouldn't speculate that it would go as far as the movements in the 1920s and 1930s, but I think that perhaps the nature of the movement there specifically is slightly different. And it certainly worries me. Can I call or should we call?
Yeah.
Can I call on people or will you call on people? I can call? Okay.
Very nice, thank you.
So in the early 30s, late 20s, was the treatment of the Romas sort of a prerequisite in Germany to what happened in the Holocaust with the Jews?
It's hard to say.
Can you repeat the question?
So the treatment of the Roma in 1920s and 1930s, sort of a precursor of what happened to the Jews. Prerequisite.
Precursor, okay.
Prerequisite of what happened to the Jews later on. So first, I need to give you a caveat. I'm not a historian, but I study discrimination today. So I can only speak to this from a limited perspective. What I would say is I think that the end was directed at the Jewish population was its own, and that developed on its own. I think was probably much stronger than at the institutional high level than that against the Roma. But I think that perhaps some institutions like the camps, right, sort of provided a vehicle of carrying things out. So perhaps they weren't necessarily prerequisites, right? But they made it very, they may have made it more easy to visualize how to achieve certain ends, just because they were already there. And so it's, I would suspect that perhaps they said, oh, we already have these camps, they're labor camps, they're concentration camps, they're for socials now. Why don't we expand? So I can see that being the connection, but I do believe that the animals, as far as the Jewish population is concerned, was independent. But that is my opinion. I would defer to more expert opinions on that.
What percent, and I know it's an approximation, what percent of the Romani population was killed in the Holocaust? Give or take. I mean, I know it's sort of guesswork, but
It's very difficult to say. Based on the numbers that I got from the more conservative source, if you like, 23,000 were taken to Auschwitz, and almost none of them returned. I would think a very high percent. But it's very difficult to say because a lot of the Roma perhaps escaped because they weren't registered. So there is that possibility, but I would just say from the people that we know that were targeted and fairly
Are there any countries in the world where Roma are better treated that you can cite, in Europe or whatever, just in contrast to this really picture as we have?
Yeah. Historically, in Europe, Turkey. Right now, in Europe, Macedonia, actually. Outside of, there are always incidents everywhere, but I would say that on average, Macedonia is a better place to be a Roma than many other places. The Roma in the US are, I think, better off because the norms here by now are different, at least as the Roman population may be concerned. But traditionally, I think Macedonia is cited as more accepting than other places in Europe.
When Sarkozy sent 10,000 Roma out of France, didn't he send them directly to Romania?
Yes.
Yes, and whether they belong there or not, that's where they went.
Yes, that's right.
The Romanians accepted payment for their receipt of the Roma.
I'm not sure that they did. They may have, yeah.
And then they worked their way back.
Yeah.
Now, the French have always had a very well-defined attitude toward assimilation, their version of assimilation. But has the Roma attitude toward assimilation changed over the past few decades?
So, yes. So I'm now speaking from personal experience in terms of fieldwork, interviews that I've done with people. And so by necessity, it's a limited set of people that I've talked to. I see that yes, so the attitudes have changed. So what the attitudes were before, there was a dichotomy. Either you left the settlement and you integrated completely into majority population, or you stayed. Right? If you integrated, you couldn't come back. You weren't really welcome. So the older generation of Roma who have left their communities and integrated into majority populations, they were not welcome back. And that was sort of the predominant view of assimilation. That now younger generation, so people who are now in their 30s, have started to change that. So they have, as they've been able to get educated, and many haven't because these barriers still exist, but those who have, they are now more committed to trying to give back. But so by necessity, by leaving and by wanting to give something back, they do return. So the landscape is now starting to change in terms of assimilation. Or it's not assimilation anymore, right? It's not even integration. Right now, what we talk about mostly is inclusion, right? Because that is also the aim that these young activists have. They're not trying to integrate the Roma into something that the Roma are not. The aim is to include the Roma as they are into these majority populations. So right, the younger generation now has a different view because they've redefined what they really want. So it's no longer assimilation, now it's inclusion. And they're being, I think, accepted slowly by the older generation as well.
Have the Roma in Western Europe specifically and Northern Europe, have they been affected by the rise in anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim sentiment? Is that something that has sort of bled over into affecting the Romani, or has that been mostly sort of separated?
No, I think it's bled over. The general level of intolerance that has risen. I was talking earlier about Sweden ending its sterilization practices in the late 70s, right? What they have not ended, and that came out last year, is their big registry of Roma. They've continued that, right? So now it came out that they have these long lists of Romani names that, well, they argue that the list is for crime prevention purposes. But on that list, there are over 1,000 names that belong to children, and some of them are 2 years old, right? So crime prevention from a 2-year-old, please. So there are these practices, right, that still exist, almost unapologetically. So in terms of things being over, things have bled over, but it's also that the practices have quietly continued. I believe that these lists that Swedish police have been compiling never stopped. They just continued to be compiled. And it's just that now that the knowledge is out in the open, that maybe they will address something.
I have a question about, you mentioned, does the status of the Roma go down when they leave the settlement? Does that mean if they're employed, that their status goes down in their settlement? Because if you leave, you get a job on the grid. Does that mean that your status goes down?
I think before, I'm not sure how much of role employment played. I think I would say that here we would have to divide, at least into 2 groups, the countries, right? So the former socialist spaces. It's no longer, no. So places like Yugoslavia, for example, right, where I'm from, everybody had a job, right? So everybody worked. So the Roma lived in a settlement, but they all had jobs. So clearly jobs had very little to do with status in terms of, leaving or not leaving. In other places where there weren't jobs, I think there may have been an interesting interaction, right? But I don't think having a job is a necessary factor in determining sort of status and recognition. Or lack of status. Yeah, but it's true that the people who did leave mostly left in order to get jobs or move out, or sort of, upward mobility was probably one of the larger reasons why they leave. So it is related, but I'm not sure it's the absolute cause of lack of status. Yeah.
Just in regards to your personal experience regarding NGOs or INGOs with your fieldwork, have you seen any of those organizations in Europe being able to school system to maybe educate the younger, the youth, of the, the major, all ethnicities of what's going on, or do you see that it's the state's pressure or stance to not integrate any knowledge of Romani and what's happened in the past? So do you see that if the youth of all these European nations were more informed of what's going on currently, or being able to have access to those classrooms showing and documenting what's going on, do you think that would change things?
Yes, I think it would. So there's very little of that. So I will speak to two aspects. The first aspect is this. So I haven't actually looked at syllabi from schools other than those in Slovenia and Croatia. So I can't speak outside, but I think my guess is probably the same story as in Slovenia and Croatia. But I've examined all of them for all primary school classes in Slovenia and in Croatia. Not a single one includes a reference to the Roma. Not in civics, history, or anything, you name it. The Roma are not mentioned, and that includes schools where a lot of students are Roma. So the Roma don't learn about their own history in primary school, right? So it's not, and all, of course, along with that, non-Roma don't either, right? They don't learn about the Roma history either. They don't learn about the current situation in tolerance classes. The Roma are not mentioned at all. So children are not, as far as I know, children are not really taught about these issues. Now, there is an organization in Romania that does interesting inclusion exercises through sports. Specifically, they teach children soccer. And they focus on children who are disadvantaged, but both Roma and non-Roma. And they have mixed groups. So those kids are exposed to one another from early on, and then they have fun together and they train together. And that seems to work very well. So, if you work on active inclusion in the classroom, I think that would actually help a lot. And if you add education to that, that would probably help more. At this point, I really am not familiar with any formal programs that would do that. In Slovenia and Croatia, right? There may be some in other countries that I haven't looked at, but as far as I know, I think it would be a good idea, but it's not done well.
I have a two-part question. One, could you tell us any of the NGO, you mentioned NGOs in your presentation without specific reference. Are there any NGO groups that you can cite that are doing especially good work with Roma today? And second, are there any Roma individuals who have emerged as leaders who may have broken through some of the barriers to their, to the prejudice exerted against them that you are aware of in any country?
Okay, so the NGOs, there's an NGO in Budapest. It's called ERRC, European Roma Rights Center. And they are the NGO that does most of the strategic litigation at the European Court of Human Rights. And they have been extremely successful in bringing cases and winning them. So they're a fantastic organization. They do a lot of that. But they operate at a really high level, right? Litigation, not as much on the ground. So their connection to the actual communities on the ground is not as strong. Another organization that is very good is Roma Increase from Romania. And their connection actually to the Roman community is very strong. So they, for example, are the organization that piloted the medical assistance program, where they would have people, either nurses or non-nurses, who were trained in healthcare to go to settlements and inform the Roma of, what happens when you go to the doctor. They would go to the doctor with them. And that program improved the level of healthcare that the Roma could get substantially, so much so that it was then adopted with the government of Romania, with the health ministry. So that's one. Then there's another, I'm not sure which organization was first to institute that, but there's another program that now exists in several countries on Romani teaching assistants. So they would have teaching assistants in classrooms for younger children who spoke Romani, because of course the languages are different. The Roma speak Romani, but then they also speak the dominant language in their country, they're not educated in Romani. They're educated in their second language. Right? So these Romani assistants would help with this transition. There's a great organization in Slovenia, Roman Union, and it operates on several fronts. It focuses on Roma and non-Roma relations, so it tries to bridge the gap by organizing activities that are fun. So that's similar to the program on soccer, except it's for young people and adults, where people can form friendships because it turns out it actually helps in reducing anti-Roma sentiment. There are many organizations that do good work, but those are the ones that sort of stand out to me.
Emerging, any Romas that have emerged in a public way to a leadership role in a country or representation role. Are there any such individuals?
There are young people running for office now. They're having some success. Stanko Daniel is one of them. He's really running in Slovakia. Actually, Margareta Matake is the former director of Roman Greece in Romania. So, prominent is relative, right? She's not well known by just random people, but she is one of, I think, the new leaders and thinkers in this area. And I would definitely send her out as she's currently a postdoc at Harvard. So she's trying to spread the word in a different way until she goes on to do the next thing. So yeah. Oh.
So I have a question about the sign that you showed us earlier. It said that we don't serve Romanians and East European gypsies. I don't really understand. I think I need clarification. Did they mean Romanians from Romania, or did they mean the Roma? I'm not sure if there's a difference. So I needed clarification for it.
I think it's Romanian or East European gypsies. I think it just what they mean is we don't serve Roma from Romania or other Eastern European countries. I would say that's probably what they mean. Though you do bring up an interesting point. I think in America we have a very poor sense of how many Roma live here because many identify as Romanian on the census forms. So there's a possibly inflated number of Romanians living in the U.S. and a deflated number of the Roma. But I think here it's just, we don't know how to spell. So that's why it's funny. But I believe that's what they meant. They meant we don't like Roma, not from Romania or anywhere else.
Could you address the relationship between Roma and Sinti? Are there differences which make them opposed to each other, or do they collaborate, or what?
I think it really depends on the community. There are differences. There are differences that have been established a long time ago. So I think they're really, I don't know if I would call them clan-based differences. They're larger than clan-based differences. They're just different groups. But I think cooperation depends really on the community and on the people. So sometimes the Roma will cooperate a lot between communities or different NGOs, and sometimes there will be less of that, and that's just sort of really, not necessarily at the personal level, but more at the historic level of cooperation between communities. So I don't think I can confidently speak to a trend. And it's actually the same with NGOs. Some NGOs will get along and some won't, but it's as I said,
earlier you were talking about some of the issues that the Roma were facing in terms of citizenship after the in Slovakia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do we see them having citizenship status issues in other countries? Are they full dual citizens, either de facto or de jure, in say, the European Union versus, you know, some of the Eastern European countries that don't take part of that. Like, how is their citizenship status affected as you move into different regions?
Yes, there is citizenship, but they may not have papers. Right, that would be the one that I would point out, is that many don't actually have papers. So you know, technically, you know, they exist, they're citizens, but maybe formally they may not necessarily. You know, it's actually one of the reasons why trafficking is so devastating in these communities. And that's something I haven't really touched upon. The easiest people to traffic are the Romani children, right? Because if they have no documents, how will you trace them, right? It's someone who never existed in the first place, sort of, at some level, right? Of course they have citizenship, but if they don't have papers, they have all sorts of problems. And when they face administrative discrimination and difficulties in getting papers, right, the reasons, sort of, the barriers are so high that sometimes it just doesn't make sense for them to go through them over and over again. So that is where I would put my problem, right? It's actually up to papers, for example.
Anna, thank you so much for
Just a quick question. Are there public policy institutes or organizations in the United States that are helping to try to educate our populace, particularly in light of the fact you're saying that many Roma are self-identifying as Romanians in a way of getting under the barrier of discrimination in this country? Or academic institutes that are essentially trying to develop Romani studies in a way to try, as many other groups in this country who faced discrimination and genocide have tried to counteract some of those perspectives.
There's not that many, but as many as you would expect. But I think they're starting up now. So there's this institute at Harvard, FXA, which is where Magda Mataka is now trying to work to make this happen, right? So to work on precisely this issue. So I think they're doing a fantastic job of trying to reach out, and so they're organizing conferences, and they're trying to inform people of what is going on. Professor Ian Hancock has a strong base in Texas, so he's another source of a lot of that knowledge. And then I don't know if the Holocaust Museum, I think, is starting to come up with new sources, and I think those are going to be incredibly valuable as we move along. So I'm hopeful for the development of more, but these are the ones that I'm most familiar with.
Thank you, Anna, so much.